दोनों ओर के सैनिक पांसे की नोकों पर नर्तन करते अपने विरोधी को हराने के लिए आगे बढ़ते जा रहे हैं। प्रत्येक दिव्यास्त्र को उचित दिव्यास्त्र से रोका जा सकता है, लेकिन उनका चयन योद्धाओं की बुद्धि पर निर्भर है। कुरुक्षेत्र के इस युद्ध में क्या आप जीवित बच सकते हैं, इसका निर्णय भाग्य और योद्धाओं के कौशल के हवाले है। जानिए, आपको मिलती है वीरगति या बनते हैं सम्राट युधिष्ठिर के राज्य का हिस्सा। खेलिए महाभारत युद्ध पर आधारित यह रोचक खेल, रणभूमि कुरुक्षेत्र।
You're on mute.
I unmuted myself. Apparently, I didn't get unmuted. Okay. So, namaste and welcome to today's episode of Kahisuni Season-2. This is Bharati here, standing in for Gaurav. And I'm very honored to be here today hosting this session with Rajesh Ramachander ji, who has written one of my favorite stories in Flight of Deities anthology, which is what we're going to be discussing today. So Rajesh ji is an IT consultant who is also passionate about reading books and Indian history, and he has brought together both these passions in writing this story for this anthology. So as the name suggests, the Flight of Deities anthology brings to us 10 stories that talk about the desecration and destruction that happened to the temples and deities of our country when we faced invasions. And in his story, which is titled The Will of Gods, Rajeshji brings to us the story of Madurai Meenakshi. So he takes us through the Islamic invasions of Madurai. He takes us through three separate attacks of Madurai that left the city bleeding and battered, but through which he brings out the indomitable spirit of the people. So he takes us through the horrors of these invasions, but also brings to us the spirit and the courage of the people, especially the custodians of the deities and of Madurai Meenakshi temple. And that is the story that we'll be talking about today, The Will of Gods, from the anthology Flight of Deities. So let me bring in Rajesh ji now and ask him my first question, which is, so all this, you've been working on the story, a tough journey, writing the story, crafting it, then you've edited it, honed it. Now finally you're holding it in your hand, you're here today with the book printed, published outside. So how are you feeling about it?
I feel very fantastic that the story has come out and it's published. Very happy to see it come out, and it was a great experience writing the story, researching on the topic, and finally, taking several versions for it to get edited and to see the shape it has come out. It's a very fruitful journey, I would say.
Yeah. So what exactly brought you into the writing? I mean, how did you become an author? What inspires you to write? And for our viewers, actually, Rajesh ji's daughter Raksha has been part of Indic's first anthology, again a collection of 10 stories, which was Unsung Valor. And his daughter was one of our youngest authors there. She was 19 when she wrote it. I just asked him how old she was. And Rajesh ji has written in this anthology, so it's something writing kind of runs in their blood, I would say. So it's in the family. So how did you get into writing, Rajesh ji, and what kind of inspires you to write?
So writing has always been a passion which I have not pursued. When I say not pursued, I've done some writing for school level essays and plays. Beyond that, I did not. My work and career did not give me much time for me to spend. But during the COVID time, it was a lot of interesting, good things happened too, right? During those moments.
Yeah.
So I've had more time to read several books. And then the idea struck that why don't I start writing? In fact, I started writing a short story on a different topic. Actually, it's entirely about an experience of an individual who is in a very corporate setting and transforming into a more spiritual world. It was during that time that I came across uh, this opportunity
Okay.
to publish or to take part in Indicas. And when it initially came, I had to submit a written. I had to write. All of us had to write and qualify. So I took some effort to write about the story, and I started when we started Flight of Deities. Inspiration is Meenakshi Jain's book, original book, The Flight of Deities,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and especially the chapter because when I was reading through the book, I was amazed the way it has she has covered so deep into a lot of invasion that has happened. And what surprised me the most was I know north of India was under a lot of attack continuously, but for me it was a learning to even know that even south of India, where also went through a lot of upheaval, and it did not stop. Like what we think, up to Hyderabad or Warangal, but it came
Mm.
down deep
Yeah. Correct.
to Madurai, and that touched a chord. Because personally, I had been to Madurai a few times to the Meenakshi temple, and nowhere it is covered in our history books, or nowhere is the story even alive that that temple was also desecrated
Correct.
by leaders. And I saw this single chapter on Madurai invasion, on Meenakshi Jain's book, and wanted to expound it a little more. Uh, want to create what could be the life at that time, what kind of
Mm.
characters, um, how they would have defended. As we all know, there's a lot of writing around that in terms of Kampanna, the prince of the Vijayanagar Empire, and his wife Ganga Devi, has written left a lot of valuable material about the invasion and capture of Madurai. So, like there's a lot of information. It's about a question of how do I connect all these dots
Mm.
and be able to put a story together. And what was also inspiring is it's always not the uh, it's like an unsung hero, right? Heroes I'll portray as these are ordinary temple priests,
Correct. Correct.
the temple related architects, workers. They are the ones who were the
Yeah.
front to defend,
Right.
and they defended it with all their might. May not be with
Yes.
weapons,
Correct. Correct.
but whatever resource at their disposal they could. And I took the cues from there and started carving out a story. So that's the inception of it.
So it was quite a jump from writing a corporate based story to a history based story. Is that because you were driven by a passion for Indian history, or was there some other reason also that kind of motivated you to get into give this a shot?
So I've always found there's a lot of material about Indian history, but more written from the eyes of a Westerner,
Correct.
the invaders. In this case, it could be the Islamic invaders or the later period, the British, right? But there is very less account of our own version of the history,
Correct. Correct.
and these records are so sparse and suppressed that many people do not even know, right?
Right.
What did the empires do? For example, Vijayanagar Empire, they were one of the biggest empire in the south, uh,
Mm.
and hardly much is written in the history books. And the kind of thing that they have done to revive Hinduism uh, during the 14th and 15th century, even going into 16th century when there was a decline of the empire, was massive. But for these kings and queens who fought continuously, uh, India would have been a very, very different demographic by
True.
now.
True. Correct.
So it is time I felt that we all need to start going deeper, not at the surface level on what is being taught in a school or generally being discussed as history, but what is the
True.
real, and see what we can do as our bit to tell the stories, to rewrite it, to showcase what has happened, what could have been the situation. These were my inspiration to write this story.
Okay. And I think in particular, South Indian history is covered very, very sketchily when you go to a school curriculum, especially if you look at CBSE, going by my own experience, which is like several decades old though. But we had a very sketchy coverage of, Vijayanagara at least featured, but the Cholas or Pandyas, there are very few things we know about them. So I think yeah, these things do make a big difference because I don't think many people, like you said, know that down south there were so many attacks on the temples. I think this book also has another Meenakshi story, but yeah, I'll come to that later. So that covers why you were kind of motivated. But is there some other personal experience that made you write about Meenakshi? Because there is another Meenakshi story in the book. Not that I'm complaining, I like that one also. But did you know that there was another story about Madurai Meenakshi? And was
Not
it you didn't?
not not until about we were finalizing and about to launch is when I saw or came to
Okay.
know the other one. I was very curious. But my inspiration was more I had a connect with Meenakshi and I saw the story or read the story from Padma Shri Meenakshi Jain. That was a reason also why.
Okay.
And I started. It was a genuine research, right? Did it really happen? Are we?
Mm.
Uh, was there even invasion? Was it even possible that from the north of Delhi that Alauddin Khilji's armies marched towards the south as
Mm.
Malik Kafur as general? And yes, there were written accounts, there were evidences, and how for about a period of about 48 years, uh, Madurai was under a very very dark age. Not just
Mm.
Madurai, but even the adjoining thing,
Mm.
because openly certain practices could not be carried out, religious practices. I mean, and it just took another heroic effort from Vijayanagar Empire to free Madurai even, right? And what is so nice about this is today's India, where for political and other reasons, we don't touch, we don't see these
Yeah, yeah.
topics
Correct.
being discussed. And there's a lot of chauvinism in terms of region, language, and stuff. But you see, the Vijayanagar Empire was equally sponsoring literature in, say, in Tamil
Mm.
or Telugu or Kannada. And that has pretty much been the way the kings of ancient
Correct,
India
correct.
there was less of division, and people were uh, encouraged to do their works in their native language. At the same time, whatever is regionally, very special, that was preserved, that was honored. And when a king even took over another kingdom, they
Yeah.
didn't go about desecrating and destroying
Correct, correct.
the temples.
Right.
Rather, they did their part. You see, Madurai Meenakshi Temple, Vijayanagar Empire also did, and so is another other places that they went to Chidambaram Nataraja Temple, wherever. And this has been pretty much when the Choras went up
Correct,
north,
correct.
conquering, they were not demolishing any other temple. They were actually contributing to the growth of other temples.
You
And
see a lot of old temples where you see different architectural styles building one on top of another. You see a Pandya style, then you see a Chalukya. You see a blending of many styles, showing that the kings were more into building and not breaking down, like you're saying. That's true. Yeah.
it's more like a kind of a positive competition, right? It's like how the architecture. If the
Right.
Cholas had built in one architecture, the same would be done by the Vijayanagar in
Mm.
a more intricate form, right? It's like, can I do better than you? Was
Yeah. It was a healthy competition. Yeah.
correct.
And the competition was not at a ground level where the people would be affected so much by it. They were not pitting one against the other. It was the political level competition was happening, warring was happening, but the people were not affected to that extent. There were instances, but generally, no, like you were saying, uh, this was not where they took out their, wrath or frustration. So I guess that's why we see the preservation. We also see the permeation from one era to another. The styles permeate, or the traditions permeate and probably grow. I guess that's why it was able to expand or cross boundaries also. Right. That's true. So, are these what records? What kind of research did you do? Can you take us through that? What kind of sources did you use? what was that journey like?
So there are multiple, I wouldn't say in one source, there are multiple records, books. Also tried to access some of the accounts of how the Vijayanagar Empire had through Ganga Devi, the wife of Kampana, and also some of the attributes of what Madurai also was. How
Hmm.
Madurai was ancient thing, how Vaigai was flowing, how the kingdom was set up, what kind of culture was there,
Okay.
uh, and what setting was. So this story happened in the 14th century when it was relatively very peaceful. People were going about their daily affairs and business, and now you have a very large army that has suddenly landed from up north, and all they wanted was the all the gold, because one of the things about our ancient temples are they were also repositories of a lot of gold.
Correct. Correct.
So, and that was also something which the invaders. So it's part. I would say it's partly a religious zeal that drove them, but a big part is also contributed by the amount of gold that these temples amassed. And by taking the gold, they would just move away, desecrating the whole things. And so they wanted both objective, right? One is to uh, establish a new ideology by force. The second is also the how much wealth they can drain out of India,
Correct.
and that was the objective which drove the invaders, and it shook the civilizational values of people, right?
Right.
Because normally when two kings would fight, people in India would, when I was reading some of the accounts, people would go about their daily trade, their
Hmm.
farming, agriculture practice. Nobody will be, but here was a different setup where
Correct.
when you invade, it's not just the armies,
Yes.
the
Civilians
civilians
are, yeah. Right.
will attack and horrible things, right?
Hmm.
Like we talk about the Taliban or the Al Qaeda and stuff, but all these atrocities have happened here also. It's
Correct.
just
Correct.
it has been kept under a carpet, but it's good to surface this and at least bring into the lives of youngsters, because when I was growing up, there was a lot of a different version of history, right? Where there was nothing to be proud upon for someone practicing the native religion of India,
Hmm.
and those the attributes were not directly, but at many instances to be something to be ashamed of. But on the contrary, when you dig deeper, it's not just the depth of the philosophy, the spiritual values, and even the economic power that India and the freedom that women enjoyed, and the way people went about their business peacefully is something that we should be aware, because at some point in time this can become a spark and can start inspiring people to about how can we make things better, rather than saying things are all lost and should we go and
Yeah.
adopt some other things, some other values, some other culture, but can we start to revive in whatever little ways each one of us can do.
So, on that topic, I think today probably one of the biggest problems that we have is that we have not been able to pass on the value that our heritage had. In a lot of ways, people are not aware of what we were. They have been fed a different idea by maybe Western scholars, like you were saying, Western scholars talking about our history is what is more popular today. So, the right version of history not being passed on means that the right strengths that we have not been conveyed to the next generation or even our generation. So, how do you think anthologies like this, or writing, or books in general, can help you?
Books in general will help a lot, especially uh, those who like to read. And see, knowledge is always about self-discovery, right? It's where
Correct.
does it take? And for those interested in history, I definitely want to commend Indica as a platform here, because Indica as a theme is about going into Indian side of Purva Paksha, right? Getting into the Indian view of how things would have happened, and that would actually kickstart a lot of things. One is there will be genuine discussion. If there is a view, there is a counter view. If there is a
Correct.
view, Why is there a counter view? What could have happened? Does the counter view is supported by facts, or is it again by fables? Or is a view supported by facts or fables? I think once we start looking at it more from a uh, intellectual standpoint too, people will start getting more clarity that there is another version of this, and if that version is true, how is the version being narrated, and is there truth to it? That will make people go and take genuine, pursue genuine knowledge. Otherwise, the way it was, people were getting a lot more ashamed about our background and our
Yeah, true,
culture,
true.
to blindly adopt whatever the Western practices were. So this kind of story writing, uh, and a lot of youngsters, I talk because I have
Yeah, yeah.
three young kids in my family, and I've seen them. They also like to read. Right? It's a genuine curiosity to know the world. But what do we present them? What do we give them as options? Is it very important? And your question of how do we inculcate, right? It's not just by how do we even write unless we start uh, thinking deeply about these issues, looking at it from what could have happened, questioning, debating, and also discussing with very knowledgeable people in terms of, and when I say knowledgeable, it can come from many pockets, right? So I've also been drawn at times to the writings of Kanchi Mahapariva, where it may not be exactly these topics, but then some insights that you beautifully get about some of the life, some of the practices, and so forth, why it existed, why was it done. So I think we just have to keep our eyes open and be ready to learn and unlearn what might not have been.
But how do you see nowadays? I don't think people have the attention or the time to read a long story format. So, how would you like to? What do you think would be the future of even reading? Even if you look at a WhatsApp forward, people generally don't even look at a 3 minute video. So, how would you look at a future in which we convey these messages? Like if you talk about, that's why Sutradhar is working so well, I guess. They have this short format app, videos and stories, and through their app they have a lot of things being communicated, or they have these short videos which work very well in conveying little stories or little tales, or they break up longer tales into shorter formats, and in that way they're able to communicate, or they're doing it via games and puzzles, all of which you can, by the way, buy in from the description. So, how do you look at this? How do you think our stories are typically like enormous things. So, how do you look at a future where we can convey these things in a short format? Can you think of any other format instead of just a book or something like that?
I'm very glad you asked this question because I'm a technologist myself.
Mm.
So today, the rapidity at which AI has
Mm-mm.
changing the landscape, a lot of it's like a media, right? When I before I go into the AI aspect, see, in ancient times also these stories were discussed,
Yeah.
but they were all capsules, right? And we used to call them as delivered in Sanskrit shlokas, or they'll be in particular chandas or meters,
Yeah. Yeah.
and some certain syllables that will be conveyed and through the memory, and if you look
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
people
Correct.
memorize and transfer, and then they will sit in front of a big crowd in a temple and expound it. We used to call it Skada Kalakshepa and all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as media changed, right, then there was drama to narrate. A lot of good dramas in ancient India, because that was a time where people could go to a temple event, witness a drama where things would be again conveyed.
Correct.
Then the writing thing started up where people had time to printed work started, right, where we were able to read a printed material, and so all these things were going. But now what I see is with the power of AI, one can one need not be a director or a producer now. An individual, if they put enough effort, they can create fantastic videos, right,
Mm.
from your written material. So, having said that, it's not that perfect, right? You still have to do a lot of
Correct.
tinkering, stand. But where I see it going is there may be a time, not too long, where we would be able to describe all our characters, play it, put in a theme, and be able to visually explain the entire story, bring to life all the characters, bring to life all the settings, and then that can be a creation, and that can be something that can be published for consumption. And, that's a very very viable thing, and that can be again aided, right? That's a story, and where does it stand on? It can stand on a written material, written book, or it could also bank on other references. So it's going to be pretty interesting which way the way things are going, and how soon as writers we start adopting some of these techniques.
Sutradhar is pretty much, I think, on that same wavelength. They have actually have a theme-based game which they recently launched called Rangbhumi. So the idea is that Rangbhumi will be they have a Kurukshetra-based game. The central concept is Rangbhumi, in which they have launched their Kurukshetra right now. So that is the way they convey the what happens to the war, the main events of the war through that game. So they have several things like this that they're working on. So I think there has been a kind of cohesive effort from many players in this niche to actually utilize what is the current tools that we have. I think they also are coming up with a digital version of the game. They've been using an app to convey tales, and also I think there is a cohesive effort right now that we are seeing a kind of renaissance of types of sorts that is happening, where we are using the current available tools to adapt and bring our tales from the ancient format to the new format, which hopefully we'll be able to make a dent with. But yeah, let's come back to the story. I think I wandered off somewhere. So you were mentioning something about the details of the story, where in your story you have some of these very interesting incidents where you have the gold being taken away and stored elsewhere, or the idols being placed in a special compartment. So I was wondering whether all this is recorded somewhere. How much, when you're writing historical fiction, there is always this challenge. You have a certain boundary fixed for you. You have markers which you can't supersede. Like you can't decide suddenly that Kafur attacks Madurai in 2023. You have a marker that you have to work within. So when you have to add fiction elements to dramatize or to convey a story, how challenging is that? What are the challenges that you face there? And
So
how much of your story is fiction? How much is history?
I would say most of the historical parts are all the true ones that I could research and get,
Mm.
in terms of dates, in terms of the desecration, where
Mm.
Kafur's army actually burnt Meenakshi
Mm.
temple, and also how the Vigrahas were hidden away from the sight of the invaders. And there was also the sacrifice of a priest who was beheaded. These are all recorded things.
Oh, okay. Even
So,
that part is recorded. Okay.
so some of these things I kind of didn't want to change or alter. But
Okay.
what would have happened between that, right? If there is a temple head priest, what could have been running in his mind? Because he
Mm-hmm.
saw the deities as his own father and mother.
Correct. Correct.
He was ready to throw his life to protect it.
Correct.
And so were others who were helping him, in this case his son and his grandson. If you look at the whole story, it spans 3 generations.
I was going to come to that. Yeah.
So you have Neelakanta Dikshidhar, who was
Yeah.
the chief priest, and he gets a premonition that something adverse is going to happen.
Mm.
And he sends away his son and his grandson and says he's going to stay in the temple
Correct.
because
Correct.
they have to do all the worship according to the agamas,
Correct.
and there cannot be a closure of temple.
Correct.
And he continues to do it, and then he also resists, because when it was very common, right? They get an instinct that it's for the goal that they have landed, so they have to protect the goal. So the first pass was when there were 3 raids of Madurai. The
Mm.
first pass Vigraha's, they hide the gold, but they have to give some gold as a compromise for Kapoor
Correct,
to.
correct.
And in the interim, the chief priest actually sacrifices his life, trying to protect when they douse it with fire. But in the second part, again there was an invasion. But by the time the Pandyan Empire itself has become weakened because
Weekend, right.
a lot of brutality, and the king actually never returned back to Madurai
Yeah.
for the second invasion. So that time, what happens is his son is now standing up against the invaders. It's not Malik Kafur because Alauddin Khilji has lost his throne, or himself was assassinated. And then you have a new set of people coming in from the same sultanate, and they invade. And this time, the chief priest's son, Subramaniam, who is now the chief
Subramanian.
priest, he stands resisting, right? And then there is again a sacrifice, and third generation is Natarajan, who is a young teenager who has grown up to a priest, chief priest, and he starts to, but he's now guided by the Stapati, or the temple architect.
Ganapati, yeah.
And these architects are very renowned because they know nook and corner of the thing. Any kind of work they have to carry according to the agamas. And then under his guidance, they start finding a way. And it's literally done like that. They had to put a separate wall for covering Sundareshwar in
Yeah.
the temple premise. And they had to take the golden vigrahas with them. And these are accounts which I brought in as it was. Brought in elements of, there was the architect's daughter, Sundari,
Right.
and they had to flee with this. And for about, after 48 years, they come back. And it's recorded, Ganga Devi's work also is recorded that when they come back, they see the lamp that has been lit in the temple.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, that's a beautiful scene, yeah.
And so 3 generations of sacrifice, and then you have the temple again manifesting, or protected by the new empire. So a lot of sacrifices happen. So I wanted
Yeah,
to bring
correct.
bring that aspect.
That was one of the most, I think, poignant but most powerful aspects also, that you kind of showed how the devotion and the dedication continues through generations. Like you said, the temple priest, there are 3 generations that you're covering. But even with the Stapati, it is Sundari also who finally participates. She plays an active role. So you're covering a couple of generations there as well. So the idea is that the spirit never dies. They may have
Right.
temporarily have had to move away, but the spirit never dies. Their devotion never dies. So, was there a specific reason why you chose to go through 3 invasions and 3 generations instead of talking about one particular attack? Was there a reason why you chose to span such a long, period of time and go through so many, go through a kind of passage of legacy?
Correct. So the idea was that the whole event spans. Uh, there was 48 years where the Sultanate was ruling Madurai, but prior to that, there's more than a decade of attacks. So if you look at the whole span of 50 to 60 years, it's not feasible with just one generation protecting it. It was every, and in real life, while the kings and the queens fought against the invaders, a lot has been done by the temple priests. This is a fact. They were the first line of defense when it comes
Yeah,
to the
right.
temple, and they would not, go away, let it go, to watch it get desecrated. They were ready to throw their lives to protect the thing, and that defense was always there, right? And you see the dedication because they are trained and they grew up to serve the deities.
Correct.
That's what they see as their mission in life. And while they go about it, they inculcate the values across the generation. So each generation stands up and does its bit. First one, the second one, and finally, right? And when they cannot defend, they find a way to take away the vigrahas and take it away. So whatever is possible, whatever is humanly possible, was done. But for their sacrifices, we would not even have those vigrahas safe or back, right? And it's not just Madurai. Wherever the
It's not
invade
correct. Correct.
happened, I've read about during Meenakshi Jain's work. I've read about another story which I was interested to, where the Srinath ji, the migration of
Mm.
Srinath from
Mm. Mm.
Mathura all the way to in Rajasthan.
Mm.
I tried to move the whole thing, so it has happened all over India.
Yeah, Srirangam has a wonderful story happening as well, several times, several attacks, and quite some horrifying incidents happening. But the point is, yeah, when they could no longer fight, they ensured that the deities were taken away from the place of danger at the cost of their own lives, at the cost of giving up their own families. They did that. So that comes out very beautifully in your story, and I must tell you this: one of my favorite scenes from your story is the first face-off that Neelakandan has with Malik Kafur's men, and then later Malik Kafur himself, right before they burn down the. That's a very powerful scene. It's a very beautiful scene, and readers should definitely read that story and the other stories in the book. It's very evocative. It kind of urges you to stand up and do something at once. It's a beautiful story. So speaking of readers, what do you think when you wrote the story? What did you want your reader to take away from it, or when a reader comes to your story, what should he expect and come? How should he approach the story?
So the what should take away is, I'll come to that before how to approach.
Hmm.
Whatever temples we see, whatever ancient structures, monuments, temples that we see spanning thousands of years, the takeaway is none of this has been preserved but for heroic sacrifices by the kings, queens, the priests, the common man, the whoever was associated with temples, right, and culture. Uh, so we take it for granted. We take
True.
our freedom for granted. We take
Yeah,
our
exactly.
independence for granted. The colors can change at any time, and we need to be vigilant. And nothing has come so easy. We need to be very, I would say, while humble at the same time, have with pride that we have the ancients have done such a fantastic job
Correct.
for us to even see this. So my key takeaway would be anyone, if a little bit of their thing gets kindled, that there was a lot of architecture, temples, which was built because our kings were not into the mode of going and building a resort. If you take a typical, Western way, anywhere you see a beautiful spot, it becomes a resort. But
Hmm.
where ancient India saw is anything beautiful, they dedicated to the gods. It was seen as more a spiritual thing. So this is a key takeaway I would like is nothing comes free. There's a lot of struggle that has gone. So let's not let's always be on guard and make sure that these values go to our next and next generation, so that they're always proud and they secure this for eternity. And your first part of the question, how do I want? Second part of the question, where how do I want to see the reader approaching it? They can approach it because I have tried to get the historical accounts in terms of the date, the timings, and stuff. So it is all the events in the story are all exactly how it has happened
Hmm.
in terms of timeline. So there is a creative freedom in terms of what would have happened, the kind of people.
Right.
That's where I've taken a creative liberty to portray how the defense had worked for securing the temple. So I would like my readers to approach with an open mind, because for them, one, they were there is knowledge there, right? The dates are all played as per the accounts, and it does not happen without the efforts, right? When we read a purely history, there is no life in it, right? It's just
Correct.
date. It either is it makes you feel sad or it makes you feel happy, but there is no account of who did what. But here is a story of showing a struggle, and people can relate to it, right? Things could have happened this way. Things might have happened. Oh, it could have been this way. I'm okay because there could be another creative liberty somebody might like to take in the same story and depict it differently too. But the fact is, yes, everybody will somewhere come to the overall abstract conclusion that there has been a fight, there has been a struggle to
Yeah.
preserve
Yeah.
and see where it is today. So
Great.
that's my submission, that approach it with a very open mind, because there is a lot of accuracy in terms of timeline and dates. There is creative liberty taken in the story, and the takeaway will be that how do we learn from this and start our small bits to
Exactly.
preserve.
Correct. I think for me as a reader, I would say one of the takeaways would be that anybody, no matter how small you are in the, you don't need to be a king to do something. You can be somebody who is a very small cog in the society. You can still do something for your to stand up for your own beliefs. You can do something on your own. I think that is one of the takeaways. And the second point that you made just now was very interesting. That when our ancients saw a beautiful place or something wonderful, they dedicated it to the gods. In other words, they actually made it a place that could be accessed by everybody, that could be accessed by the public. It was not locked away for just a few privileged people to access or own or control. It was opened up to everybody. It was created and it was nurtured into a place that so that everybody could come and partake of it or enjoy it. I think that's a very powerful message that we need to think about when we look at our own past. So, beyond books, do you think what else do you think is the need of the hour? Considering we are on this topic right now, apart from books, non-book initiatives, what do you think authors can do?
I think a lot from a from an individual standpoint, a lot we can actually influence positively our friends, the family, friends, to healthy discussions about this topic without getting into in a kind of non-healthy debate. To put it out openly,
Correct, correct.
what could have been the possibilities, and never shy away from having a kind of even a healthy debate on this. When I say that if you have to counter something, you need to actually tell it out in a very calm way too. So that's
Correct.
what I would say. The authors are very very knowledgeable because one, there's a lot of research while writing this, and
Research.
my next short story, which will also be published. I had to go and do, and I can see that if I have done this, other authors would have done a lot more, right? Those who write a lot. So this research can be brought out in your
Correct.
communication, in your professional relationship, provided there's a forum where healthy forum where such things can be discussed, and also encouraging people to go and visit these places because you
Mm.
learn a lot from traveling, and these temples are living proof of what our culture was. They have small carvings. They have depictions of how life was,
Correct.
not just all the temples. I was amazed to see Lord Bredishra temple in Tanjore,
Mm.
where they depicted a farmer to how even a baby gave a birth of a baby and so forth. So a lot
Correct.
can learn from. They were. It's like how you have these channels. Now you have those days they had this temple as a media where they
Correct.
depict stories and so forth, and it's fascinating. So can we
Yeah.
travel? Can we go visit, or can we at least see what is locally and encourage our people and preserve and also respect those who are in this profession? It's very very important, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
A lot of gravitas towards let's say economic reasons. Those who are still in these kinds of work, those who are still hereditary and working in temples, can we show them more respect? Can we give them more their due, so that they don't have to suffer for what they are doing? So that is something that can be another way that we can help. And authors are very capable because they're very sensitive. They are very sensitive to things happening, and they can portray something in a way that can touch the emotional
Mm.
chord of people. So I would say it's a very important role that all of us as small or large or big time authors play, knowing our history.
Yeah. True. That's true. I guess that's true. Yeah. So you talked about one story that you're writing for the next anthology. What is that story based on, and what else do you have in the works? What other projects are we working? Should we look forward to a father, daughter, son? I believe your son also writes. So should we look forward to a collaborated work from your family, or what else are you working on?
If it happens, I'll be very happy. They're right now busy with their academic stuff, but I'm sure Aksha and my son Rishabh will do some writing again in the future. As far as collaboration, we're not thought of it, but definitely if something a good topic and the timing comes, we will see how we can work on it together too.
And what is your next work for the
Yeah.
short
So
story?
my next work is also on based on Madurai. So
Oh,
it's a
okay.
forgotten hero. Somehow I'm tied up with Madurai a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's about an ancient during the times of Mahabharata.
Okay.
King from Madurai led his army all the way up to north of India to Kurukshetra and fought
Mm.
the battle
Mm.
along with the Pandavas. So his name is Malyadwaja Pandya, and I had to
Yeah.
bring his story, and he's an unsung hero.
Yeah.
Sacrifice.
He's quite a warrior also. He's quite a prominent warrior during the
And
war. Yeah.
somehow he's also very connected to Meenakshi because
Okay.
Goddess Meenakshi is also his daughter. So it kind of connects me with the first story too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
looking forward to. So we are in the midst of editing and finalizing. It should have a date. Not
Sometime
later
this
than
year.
definitely it should get released.
So yeah, our viewers should look forward to another story from Rajesh ji in an upcoming anthology from Indic also. I think we've kind of run over our 45-minute time. So yeah, before we wind up, so our viewers can get this anthology, which is called The Flight of Deities, in which Rajesh ji has a story called The Will of Gods. There are 10 stories talking about our temples and deities which were destroyed by invaders. And you can get this book on Padega India, Amazon, Flipkart. You can see the link down in the description also, and go buy it, read it. I read it. I really loved your Meenakshi story and the other Meenakshi story as well. And there's a question we have here. Maybe we can quickly take that. Apart from Meenakshi ji's book, what are the sources were you using for your story?
It's true. So I've done some readings on the account of the wife of Prince Kampana, Ganga Devi.
Ganga Devi.
And there was also multiple other minor sources in terms of the timeline, the attack and invasion. And these are also records that I've referred to construct it.
But Ganga Devi's account would have been for the last attack, right? The first attacks and all, are they also covered well in historical sources? Do you have a lot of evidence for those as well?
The first, no, you're right. The Ganga Devi's thing depicts the how they free up
Mm.
the Meenakshi temple as well as the entire Madurai. So there was multiple accounts I had to look. Some are in terms of sources, they are available on web. There are some historical
Okay.
accounts that are available. So I had to piece it all together, get the timeline. The timelines also I had to check multiple sources to see which
Yeah.
one is
Yeah.
most accurate. There could be some difference in a year or two between the two. There were accounts about the king, the Veerapandya king, also during that time, and where had he gone, and so forth. So, had to stitch it all together is the timelines.
So, what would you tell our readers about your anthology as a whole if you had to tell us why a reader should go and read the anthology, or what is this one single most significant thing about it or valuable thing about the anthology? What would you say?
I think my key takeaway, because not just my story, reading other stories in the anthology, key takeaway is you get history
Hmm.
um, accounted but delivered in a kind of very
Relatable way. Yeah.
consumable form
Yeah,
where
right.
you will appreciate the
Correct.
characters. So it makes it very interesting reading, right? You will get to know both the account from a timeline and historical
Correct.
standpoint,
Correct.
and at the same time the kind of events that would have likely happened, and that's where the authors take their freedom. So it'll
Correct.
make a good reading, and one should lead to the other, because once we have it, it will inspire us to read more or get into more of such things. So if that bit is something that if anthologies can push, they would have achieved the goal.
So I will hope to look forward to more of your stories and more anthologies and your standalone stories as well. And for our readers, I think, like I said, the link to Flight of Deities is there in the description. And you can subscribe to Sutradhar as well. That's in the description as well. And subscribe to their channel to talk to more, to listen to podcasts with more authors from the Flight of Deities and know what the other stories say. I think we'll end it here, Rajeshji. Thank you so much for being with us today. This was really good, and especially because I love reading that story about Meenakshi. Now I want to go read more about the history of Madurai also, thanks to your story. So I hope that happens with more readers. They want to read more about history after reading your stories. So thank you so much for being here, Rajeshji. Thank you.
Thank you.